The sky above Earth no longer resembled the azure expanse that had cradled humanity for millennia. Instead, it hung like a bruised tapestry, purple and black with swirling radiation clouds that occasionally parted to reveal the cold, unforgiving stars. Those same stars that had once inspired dreams of exploration now harbored nightmares made flesh. 42 years had passed since the Zenith Dominion arrived in Sol system, their massive void ships blotting out the sun as they descended through the atmosphere. 42 years since Earth fell. Lieutenant Arya Tanaka stood at the observation port of Shadowside Station, a ramshackle collection of mining modules and salvaged habitats buried 2 kilometers beneath the lunar surface on the far side of the moon. The station's name was Apt Humanity, now existed entirely in shadow, hidden from the regular Dominion patrols that swept through the system. Arya's reflection stared back at her from the reinforced glass, sharp features, framed by a pragmatic crew-cut dark eyes that had witnessed too much death, and the jagged scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw, a souvenir from her last engagement as a fighter pilot during the fall. "Lieutenant," a voice called from behind her. "The council is assembling." Arya turned to face Zara, the young communications specialist who'd been born in these tunnels and had never known Earth except through stories and contraband holovids. Like most lunar-born, she was tall and thin, her muscles developed in the low-gravity environment. "I'll be there shortly," Arya replied, reaching for the worn leather jacket that had once been part of her Earth Defense Force uniform. The patches had been removed, the insignias scraped away, but she wore it nonetheless, a reminder of what they'd lost and what they were still fighting for. The corridors of Shadowside were crowded with humanity's remnants. Engineers repurposed Dominion tech, scavenged from abandoned outposts. Medics treated radiation burns and void sickness with improvised medicines. Children, precious few of them, were taught mathematics and physics in cramped classrooms, preparing for a war they'd inherited before birth. Arya nodded to those she passed the gesture, both acknowledgement and encouragement. They needed to believe someone was in control, that there was still hope. Sometimes, Arya herself needed to believe it too. The council chamber was one of the larger caverns reinforced with salvaged metal and illuminated by strips of pale blue emergency lighting. Around a makeshift table fashioned from an old shuttle hull sat the remaining leadership of humanity's resistance bunker, Commander's orbital station representatives, and the captains of the few mobile vessels still operational. At the head of the table stood Commander Elias Nakamura, Arya's mentor, and the closest thing humanity had to a central leader. Nakamura was deep in conversation with Captain Nia Ortiz, the fierce commander of what remained of the Mars mining fleet. His weathered face was drawn with fatigue, the silver at his temples having spread throughout his hair in recent years. He'd been a strategic commander during the initial invasion, one of the few high-ranking officers to survive the systematic execution of Earth's military leadership. "Ah, Tanaka," Nakamura said as Arya approached. "You're just in time. We've received some troubling intelligence." The room fell silent as Arya took her seat. Captain Ortiz activated the holographic display at the center of the table. A three-dimensional map of the inner solar system flickered to life, dotted with red markers indicating Dominion fleet positions. 12 hours ago. Ortiz explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Our relay at Deimos intercepted a coded transmission between Dominion vessels. It took us some time to decrypt, but the contents are concerning." The hologram shifted, displaying an intercepted command in the angular script of the Dominion, alongside its human translation. "Operation Anvil." Arya read aloud the words, tasting bitter on her tongue. "A coordinated strike on all suspected human settlements, scheduled to commence in 14 standard days." Murmurs of alarm spread around the table. A bunker commander from Europa pounded his fist against the metal surface. "They told us it was over," he shouted. "The treaty after the fall. They said if we surrendered, the survivors would be left alone." "The Dominion never intended to honor those terms," Nakamura replied quietly. They merely needed time to consolidate their hold on our outer colonies and the resources of the inner system. Now, they're ready to finish what they started. Captain Ortiz's dark eyes flashed. My ships are armed, but we're scattered across 3 moons of Jupiter. We can't rally in time to mount a coordinated defense. Defense isn't an option, Arya said, studying the Dominion fleet deployments. We're outgunned, outmanned, and operating with technology that's 40 years out of date. If we try to defend each settlement individually, we'll be annihilated. Then, what do you suggest, Lieutenant? Asked a representative from one of the asteroid belt habitats, her voice edged with desperation. Surrender mass suicide. Arya stood leaning over the holographic display. I suggest we stop hiding and start hunting. The Dominion believes humanity is broken, scattered, and cowering in the dark. They're mounting this operation because they think it will be easy. We need to show them how wrong they are. With what? Ortiz demanded. My mining vessels have been retrofitted with point defense systems, but they're no match for Dominion cruisers. Perhaps, Nakamura interjected, it's time to deploy the Orion protocols. The chamber fell silent. The Orion protocols, named after an ancient Earth project to propel spacecraft using nuclear pulse propulsion, had been a theoretical last resort developed in secret by a cadre of engineers and former military personnel. It was brutal, desperate technology retrofitting vessels with nuclear devices that would be detonated in sequence behind the ships, the explosive force captured by massive pusher plates to generate thrust and, if necessary, offensive capability. The radiation signatures would make our vessels visible to every Dominion sensor in the system, one of the engineers objected. Precisely, Nakamura replied. We want them to see us coming. We want them to know humanity isn't quietly accepting extinction. And we want the subject races on their conquered worlds to see that the mighty Dominion can bleed. The meeting devolved into heated debates about resources casualties and the morality of what amounted to a suicide mission for many of those who would volunteer. Arya remained silent, calculating odds and reviewing mental maps of Dominion patrol routes. She had been a pilot before she became a resistance coordinator, and something about the Orion approach called to the part of her that had once soared through Earth's skies. As the arguments reached their peak, the chamber's door burst open. A scout rushed in, her environment suit still sealed at the joints, frost forming where the cold of the lunar surface met the relative warmth of the station. Commander, she gasped, Dominion dropships have landed at Tycho Crater. They've found the outpost. Tycho, Nakamura's face paled. That's not possible. The radiation shielding... Compromised, the scout replied. They knew exactly where to look, sir. They had the precise coordinates. The implication hung heavy in the recycled air. Someone had betrayed them. Casualties? Arya asked, her voice steady, despite the rage building within her. Total. The Dominion brought purifier units. The scout's voice broke. They're downloading the outpost database. If they breach the encryption, they'll have locations for every human holdout in the system, Nakamura finished. He turned to the communications officer. Initiate emergency protocol blackout. All settlements are to go dark immediately. No transmissions, no power signatures. And get me a direct line to Tycho's nearest neighbor at Mare Nubium. We need to warn them. As the council erupted into panicked action, Nakamura pulled Arya aside. I need to get to the surface, he said quietly. There's something at Tycho they cannot be allowed to find. What could be worth risking your life? Arya demanded. We need leadership now more than ever. Nakamura's expression was grim. The complete schematics for Project Orion, including modifications that would allow our ships to breach Dominion void shields. I entrusted them to Dr. Karim at the Tycho facility. I'm coming with you, Arya said without hesitation. No. Nakamura's grip on her arm tightened. If I don't return, someone needs to coordinate what comes next. Someone the bunker commanders and station leaders respect. His eyes bore into hers. Someone who understands that survival isn't enough anymore. Before Arya could protest further, an alarm blared throughout the station. The overhead lighting shifted to red, casting bloody shadows across concerned faces. "Proximity alert," announced the automated system. "Dominion vessels entering lunar orbit. Estimated time to detection 17 minutes. Nakamura released Arya's arm. "Commence evacuation procedures," he ordered. "Priority personnel to emergency shuttles. Everyone else to the deep shelters." He turned back to Arya. 14 days, Lieutenant. If I don't return, you have 14 days to prepare our people for Operation Anvil. Don't let them die hiding in the dark." With that, he was gone, moving swiftly through the corridor toward the surface airlocks. Arya watched him go, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a shroud. "Lieutenant," Captain Ortiz approached her, expression questioning. "Your orders." Arya straightened her shoulders. "Prepare your ships for immediate departure. Contact every vessel with FTL capability. We're going to need them all. And find me someone who understands nuclear engineering. We have 2 weeks to build an armada that can punch through Dominion void shields." The next 12 hours were chaos. Shadowside Station emptied in a carefully choreographed evacuation, with essential personnel boarding the small fleet of shuttles bound for backup locations throughout the system. Arya coordinated from a mobile command center aboard Ortiz's flagship, the Persistent Memory, a converted asteroid mining vessel with engines that belched plasma and a hull patched with salvaged Dominion alloys. Reports filtered in from across the system. Dominion forces had hit 3 more outposts, all with the same surgical precision that suggested inside knowledge. Each attack was followed by a complete download of local databases before the sites and all inhabitants were incinerated by purifier units, towering mechanical constructs designed specifically for human extermination. "They're gathering intelligence," Arya observed as she studied the pattern of attacks. "Building a comprehensive target list for Operation Anvil." "But how did they find these locations?" Ortiz wondered aloud. "Tycho, I can understand it was one of our larger installations. But these others, they were minimal outposts, barely on our own charts." "We have a traitor," Arya said simply. "Someone high enough to have access to our secure databases." Ortiz's expression hardened. "I want names, Lieutenant." "So do I, Captain. But right now, I'm more concerned with Commander Nakamura. We've had no communication since he left for Tycho." As if summoned by her words, the communications officer approached. "Lieutenant, we're receiving a Dominion broadcast, system-wide." The main view screen flickered to life. On it appeared the imperious features of High Lord Vrax, Supreme Commander of the Zenith Dominion Forces, in Sol System. His skin was the pale blue-gray of his species, stretched tight over a skull that bulged at the back to accommodate the enlarged brain case of the Zenith elite. 4 eyes, 2 large primary ones, and 2 smaller secondary ones above them, stared out from the screen with cold intelligence. Survivors of Earth. Vrax began his translated voice, smooth and cultured in a way that made Arya's skin crawl. "For over 4 decades we have permitted your continued existence as a gesture of magnanimity from the Dominion to a defeated enemy. However, recent acts of sabotage and insurrection have demonstrated that humanity remains incapable of accepting its rightful place in the cosmic hierarchy." The camera pulled back to reveal a figure kneeling before Vrax, head bowed, hands bound behind his back. Arya's heart constricted as she recognized Commander Nakamura, his face bruised and bloody, but his posture still defiant. "This insurgent was captured attempting to destroy valuable Dominion property," Vrax continued. "In accordance with Imperial Edict 7-93, he has been sentenced to public execution to be carried out in 7 standard days aboard our flagship, the Oblivion's Reach. Any rescue attempt will result in immediate termination." Vrax's 4 eyes seemed to stare directly at Arya through the screen. "Furthermore, we have recovered substantial intelligence regarding illegal human settlements throughout this system. These locations will be cleansed and all inhabitants processed according to Dominion law. Resistance is both futile and illogical. The Zenith Dominion is eternal. Accept your extinction with dignity." The broadcast cut off, leaving the bridge of the persistent memory in stunned silence. "He's accelerated the timeline," Ortiz said, finally. "Operation Anvil won't wait 2 weeks. As soon as Nakamura is executed, they'll begin their purge." Arya's mind raced, processing implications and formulating strategies. "Or this gives us an opportunity," she said slowly. "The Oblivion's Reach is Vrax's personal flagship, the heart of Dominion command in this system. If we could strike there—" "That's suicide," Ortiz objected. "The Reach is a Terminus-class dreadnought. It has more firepower than our entire fleet combined. Which is why they'll never expect us to attack it directly." Arya turned to the communications officer. "Contact all resistance cells. I want every ship, every pilot, every engineer with combat experience assembled at the coordinates I'm sending. We're accelerating our own timeline." "For what purpose?" Ortiz demanded. "Even with Orion drives, we can't defeat that dreadnought." "We don't need to defeat it," Arya replied, a plan forming in her mind. "We just need to board it. Commander Nakamura went to Tycho for the Orion schematics, but I'm betting he found something else, something the Dominion doesn't want us to know about. Something on that flagship. And we're going to get him and that information back." 4 days later, Arya stood in the makeshift hangar bay of an abandoned mining facility in the asteroid belt, watching as engineers transformed mining vessel shuttles and salvaged Dominion scouts into weapons of war. The Orion drives were coming together faster than she'd dared hope, thanks in large part to the expertise of Dr. Maya Karim, the lone survivor of the Tycho facility, who had escaped with a copy of the critical schematics hidden in her prosthetic leg. "The principles are sound," Dr. Karim explained, as she guided Arya through the retrofit of a former ice hauler. The doctor was a small woman with bright, intelligent eyes that contrasted with her grim expression. Her right leg, a sophisticated prosthetic from the knee down, occasionally sparked as she moved around the busy hangar. Nuclear pulse propulsion was theorized centuries ago, but environmental concerns prevented its implementation on Earth. Out here, she gestured to the void beyond the hangar shields. "We have no such limitations." The design was elegantly brutal, a massive pusher plate mounted to the rear of each vessel, connected by shock absorbers to the main hull. Behind this, a deployment mechanism would eject small nuclear devices at regular intervals. When detonated, the explosive force would be captured by the pusher plate, converting the energy into forward momentum. "The radiation signatures will make us visible from half the system away," Arya noted. "Yes," Karim agreed, "but the energy release will also create an electromagnetic pulse effect that should temporarily disrupt Dominion sensors. They'll know something's coming, but their targeting systems will be compromised." "And the void shields?" Karim's expression tightened. "Commander Nakamura discovered that Dominion void shields operate on a frequency exclusion principle. They're calibrated to repel energy weapons and kinetic projectiles within certain parameters. The nuclear pulses generate a broad-spectrum energy surge that includes frequencies their shields can't fully block. Some energy will bleed through enough to cause damage, or at minimum create localized shield failures we can exploit." "How did he discover this?" Arya asked. "He didn't," Karim replied. "I did during an autopsy of a Dominion cruiser that crashed near Tycho 3 months ago. The information was in my report to him, along with—" She hesitated. "Along with what, Doctor?" Karim glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Evidence that the Dominion ships in our system are operating with severely reduced crews. The intercepted communications suggest they're facing some kind of resource shortage, possibly a rebellion in another sector that's drawing away their personnel." Hope flared in Arya's chest for the first time in days. "If their ships are undermanned, then boarding actions become viable," Karim finished, "especially if we can breach their hulls using the Orion drives." The tactical implications were enormous. Arya had been planning a desperate strike to rescue Nakamura. Now, she began to consider something far more ambitious. "How many ships can we outfit with these drives in the next 3 days?" she asked. 20, maybe 30, Karim estimated. But Lieutenant, even with reduced crews, the Dominion's technology has vulnerabilities, Arya interrupted. Just like any technology. We've been fighting defensively for 42 years, Doctor. It's time to remind the Dominion why they should have finished us when they had the chance. Throughout the asteroid belt and the outer planets, humanity's survivors prepared for war. Ships converged on the rendezvous point, each retrofitted with the makeshift Orion drives that would give them one chance to strike at the heart of their oppressors. Arya divided her growing fleet into task forces, each assigned specific targets. The largest under her personal command would attack the Oblivion's Reach, directly, with the dual objectives of rescuing Commander Nakamura and accessing the flagship's central database. Captain Ortiz would lead a second group against the Dominion's primary communication relay at Ganymede, cutting off their ability to coordinate a system-wide response. The remaining ships would target supply depots and patrol vessels, creating a diversion that would hopefully draw Dominion forces away from the main attack. 2 days before the execution was scheduled, as Arya was finalizing the attack plan, a communications specialist approached her workstation with a worried expression. "Lieutenant, we've intercepted another Dominion broadcast. You need to see this." On the screen appeared the familiar face of High Lord Vrax, but this time his expression was different, triumphant, almost gleeful. "Attention, human insurgents," he began. "It has come to our attention that you are planning some manner of resistance to the inevitable. Such futility is beneath even your species, but your persistence has become tiresome. Therefore, I am accelerating the timetable for Commander Nakamura's execution. He will be terminated in 6 hours aboard the Oblivion's Reach. Following this, Operation Anvil will commence immediately. Consider this a final lesson in the consequences of defiance." The broadcast ended, leaving Arya staring at a blank screen, her mind racing. "They know," Captain Ortiz said from behind her. "Someone told them about our plans." "The traitor again," Arya agreed, turning to face the assembled commanders. "But they don't know everything. They're expecting us to either abandon our attack or rush in recklessly. We'll do neither." "The fleet isn't ready," objected one of the squadron leaders. "Half our ships still need calibration on their Orion drives." "Then we go with what we have," Arya decided. "Captain Ortiz, your task force will proceed as planned. My group will accelerate to intercept the Oblivion's Reach before the execution. The rest of you be ready to launch when you receive my signal. If we succeed, you'll know. If we fail—" She paused, meeting each commander's gaze in turn. "Make sure the Dominion pays a high price for finishing what they started." Within the hour, Arya's strike force, 7 ships modified with the experimental Orion drives, departed from the asteroid base, accelerating toward the inner system, where the Oblivion's Reach maintained high orbit over Earth. Each vessel had been stripped to minimal mass, carrying only essential crew, a boarding team, and the nuclear devices that would power their desperate charge. Aboard her command ship, rechristened Defiance, for the mission, Arya addressed the combined crews via the internal communication system. "For 42 years we've hidden in the shadows of our own system, watching as the Dominion stripped our world and subjugated our people. Today that ends. Not because we've suddenly discovered some magical advantage, but because we've remembered who we are. Humanity survived and thrived for thousands of years before we reached the stars. We've endured plagues, wars, climate collapse, and our own worst instincts. The Dominion thought they had defeated us. They were just getting started." She paused, aware that these might be the last words many of them would hear. "Our mission is simple: strike hard, strike fast, and show the Dominion that humanity will not go quietly into extinction. Some of us won't return from this mission, but those who do will carry forward the spark that will ignite a fire across every world where the Dominion has planted its flag. Every subjugated species, every occupied planet will see that the conquerors can bleed. Remember that when you face them. Remember Earth." 3 hours later, the small fleet approached the outer sensor perimeter of the Dominion force surrounding Earth. At Arya's command, they activated their Orion drives in unison. Nuclear detonations flowered in the void behind each ship, the energy captured by the pusher plates, and converted to thrust that sent them hurtling toward their target at speeds that conventional engines could never achieve. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Dominion sensors detecting multiple radiation signatures approaching at tremendous velocity initiated automated defense protocols. Patrol ships moved to intercept, but their targeting systems struggled to lock onto the human vessels through the electromagnetic interference generated by the nuclear pulses. Energy discharges detected, reported the sensor officer aboard the Defiance. Dominion vessels are firing blind. Maintain course. Arya ordered, strapping herself into the command chair as the ship shuddered with each nuclear pulse. Through the forward viewport, she could see Earth, once blue and vibrant, now a scorched brown orb, wrapped in radioactive clouds. Beyond it loomed their target, the Oblivion's Reach, a massive dreadnought that resembled a cathedral of metal and energy, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements and void shield projectors. Dominion fleet is mobilizing, the communications officer announced. They're vectoring toward Captain Ortiz's position. The diversion is working. A grim smile touched Arya's lips. Ortiz knows what to do. All ships prepare for terminal approach. Boarding teams to deployment stations. The Defiance and its 6 companions accelerated toward the Oblivion's Reach. Their Orion drives, pushing them to velocities that made conventional interception impossible. Dominion point defenses opened fire, filling space with energy beams and kinetic projectiles. But the human vessels were moving too erratically, their signatures obscured by their own propulsion systems. Void shields detected, the sensor officer called out. Frequency analysis matches Dr. Karim's predictions. All ships adjust pulse frequency as instructed, Arya commanded. Target their shield generators with your approach vectors. The next moments were chaos. The human vessels, now within the dreadnought's defensive perimeter, detonated their final and largest nuclear devices directly against the Dominion flagship's void shields. As Dr. Karim had predicted, the broad-spectrum energy release overwhelmed the frequency-specific shielding, creating localized failures across the dreadnought's hull. Arya was thrown forward against her restraints as the Defiance collided with the massive vessel, its reinforced prow punching through the weakened shields and embedding itself in the outer hull. Similar impacts reverberated across the dreadnought as the other human ships made contact. Breach successful, reported the tactical officer, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. Hull integrity compromised in sections 7 through 12. Boarding teams deploying now. All personnel prepare for zero-G combat. Arya announced, unstrapping from her chair and reaching for the plasma rifle mounted beside it. Remember, your objectives: locate Commander Nakamura, secure access to the central database, and neutralize command and control capabilities. Move fast, stay together, and show no mercy. They've given us none. The boarding action unfolded with desperate intensity. Human assault teams equipped with salvaged Dominion weapons and improvised explosives poured through the breach points into the massive ship. They encountered resistance immediately. Dominion security forces armed with energy staves and personal shield generators, but the confined spaces of the ship's corridors neutralized much of the technological advantage. Close quarters combat devolved into a brutal melee, where human determination and fury counted for as much as Dominion training and equipment. Arya led the central boarding team, fighting her way through ornate corridors, decorated with trophies of conquered worlds. The architecture of the ship was both beautiful and oppressive, designed to reinforce the Dominion's sense of superiority and the inevitability of their rule. Holographic displays showed scenes of subjugated planets, including Earth, while automated announcements in the Dominion language echoed through the passageways. The execution chamber should be 2 levels up, guided Dr. Karim through the communication link. She had remained aboard the Defiance to coordinate the technical aspects of the mission. There's a central lift at the junction ahead. Understood, Arya replied, signaling her team forward. They encountered a squad of Dominion guards at the lift, resulting in a fierce firefight that left 3 humans dead and the remainder wounded to varying degrees. Arya took a glancing hit to her shoulder that seared through her armor and into the flesh beneath, but she pushed through the pain, leading the survivors into the lift. As they ascended, tactical updates filtered through her comm unit. The other boarding teams had secured several key systems, including 2 of the secondary engine control rooms and an armory. Captain Ortiz's diversion was continuing to draw Dominion forces away from Earth, but they would eventually realize the true target and return to defend their flagship. The lift doors opened onto a wide ceremonial hall, its high ceiling supported by columns that resembled the spines of some enormous creature. At the far end, on a raised dais, stood High Lord Vrax himself, flanked by his personal guard. Before him, secured to a metal frame that held him upright, was Commander Nakamura. Even from a distance, Arya could see that he had been tortured. His body bore the distinctive burns of Dominion information extraction techniques. Lieutenant Tanaka. Vrax called out, his 4 eyes fixed on her with cold intelligence. How predictable that humanity would sacrifice many to save one. Your species' attachment to individuals has always been your greatest weakness. And your species' arrogance has always been yours, Arya replied, stepping forward with her weapon raised. Release the commander. Vrax made a gesture that might have been amusement. You mistake your position, Lieutenant. You have not captured this vessel. You have merely delivered yourself to me. Even now, my fleet returns from your pitiful diversion. Soon, this brief inconvenience will end, and Operation Anvil will proceed as planned. You're wrong, said a weak voice. Commander Nakamura raised his head, his eyes focusing on Arya. Show him, Lieutenant. Show him what I found. Vrax turned to Nakamura, his expression shifting to something like concern. The human deludes himself. His mind was broken during interrogation. Was it? Arya asked, taking another step forward. Or did he discover something you didn't want humanity to know? Something about the state of the Dominion beyond this system? A flicker of unease crossed Vrax's alien features. Your boarding teams will be contained. This ship cannot be taken by such primitive... He was interrupted by a massive explosion that shook the entire chamber. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and the lighting shifted to a pulsing red emergency mode. That would be the main reactor cooling system, Arya explained, using the distraction to advance further into the room. Her team spread out behind her weapons, trained on the Dominion guards. Another team should be reaching your primary communications array right about now. On cue, the holographic displays throughout the chamber flickered and died. You see, High Lord, Arya continued. We didn't come here just to rescue one man. We came to cripple your flagship access, your central database, and broadcast the truth to every Dominion world and subjugated planet in range. The truth that your empire is stretched thin, facing rebellions across multiple sectors, unable to even properly crew its vessels in conquered systems. Vrax's composure finally broke. Kill them, he ordered his guards. Kill them all! The ensuing firefight was chaotic and brutal. Dominion energy weapons clashed with human projectiles and explosives. Arya took cover behind one of the massive columns, returning fire whenever possible, while working her way toward the dais, where Nakamura was secured. A Dominion guard appeared suddenly at her side, energy stave, raised for a killing blow. Arya rolled the weapon, scoring a deep burn across her back, and came up firing. The guard fell, but others were closing in. The human boarding team was being driven back toward the lift, their numbers dwindling with each exchange. Just as it seemed the assault would fail, new weapons, fire erupted from the chamber's upper levels. Arya glanced up to see figures in the distinctive armor of the Dominion's subject races, reptilian Takar warriors and insectoid Elysians, firing down upon Vrax's guards. Reinforcements, one of her team asked in disbelief. Allies, Arya corrected, recognizing the leader of the new arrivals, Takar of Elysium, a defector who had been providing intelligence to the human resistance for months. The tide of battle shifted instantly with Vrax's guards, caught in a deadly crossfire. Arya used the confusion to reach Commander Nakamura quickly, working to release him from the restraint frame. "The database," he gasped as she freed him. "You need to access the central command console. The authorization codes. I memorized them during interrogation." "Save your strength," Arya told him, supporting his weight as he sagged against her. "Takar," she called to the reptilian leader. "We need to reach the command bridge." The Takar warrior acknowledged with a gesture, directing his forces to clear a path through the remaining guards. Together, the unlikely alliance of humans and former Dominion subjects fought their way through the ship's upper levels, eventually reaching the command bridge, an expansive chamber with a direct view of Earth through a massive transparent viewport. High Lord Vrax had retreated here with the last of his personal guard, obviously intending to make a final stand. When Arya and her mixed force of humans and aliens burst onto the bridge, he stood before the central command console, an execution order displayed on its screen, the final authorization for Operation Anvil. "It's over, Vrax," Arya announced, her weapon trained on the Dominion leader. "Step away from the console." Instead, Vrax lunged for the controls. Takar fired a single shot that took the High Lord in the shoulder, spinning him away from the console, but not killing him. He collapsed against a nearby station, blue-gray blood seeping between his fingers as he clutched his wound. "Commander," Arya said, helping Nakamura to the central console. "The codes." With trembling hands, Nakamura input a complex sequence of commands. The main display shifted, showing the Dominion's encrypted database. "Download everything," Arya ordered one of the technical specialists who had accompanied them, "and prepare a system-wide broadcast." As the specialist worked, Arya approached the fallen High Lord. "You had 42 years to wipe us out," she told him. 42 years while we hid and scavenged and nursed our hatred. Did you think we would simply fade away?" Vrax's 4 eyes regarded her with a mixture of pain and defiance. "Your victory is meaningless," he hissed. "One ship, even a flagship, is nothing to the Dominion. Our forces will regroup, and your extinction will proceed as planned." "I don't think so," Commander Nakamura said from the console. Though barely able to stand, he had managed to access the ship's external sensors. "Look." The main viewport display shifted to show the space around the Oblivion's reach. Dominion vessels were under attack from multiple directions, not just from human ships, but from craft bearing the markings of at least 3 subject races. "Did you think Earth was the only world tired of Dominion rule?" Nakamura asked Vrax. "Your empire is rotting from within. The intelligence I found confirms it. Rebellions on 17 worlds. Resources stretched to breaking point, your leadership fractured by internal power struggles. Humanity was just the beginning. Now every species you've subjugated knows you can be defeated." "Broadcast ready," announced the technical specialist. "We can transmit to every Dominion outpost and subject world within 3 light years." "Do it," Arya ordered. Then, to Vrax. "You're going to tell them the truth. All of it, the rebellions, the resource shortages, the lies you've told to maintain control. And then, you're going to countermand Operation Anvil and order your forces to stand down." "I will do no such thing," Vrax spat. Takar stepped forward, his reptilian features set in a grim expression. "You will," he said simply. "Or we will extract the information from you using your own techniques and broadcast that process instead." Faced with this ultimatum and the undeniable reality of his flagship's capture, High Lord Vrax's resistance finally crumbled. Before the transmission cameras of his own ship, he confessed to the systematic deception that had maintained Dominion control, acknowledged the multiple rebellions stretching their forces thin, and formally rescinded Operation Anvil. As the broadcast concluded, reports began flooding in from across the system. Dominion vessels confused by contradictory orders, and the unexpected alliance between humans and subject races were either surrendering or withdrawing to defensive positions. Several Dominion commanders, seeing the writing on the wall, had already defected, turning their weapons against loyalist ships. "It's working," Nakamura said in wonder as they watched the tactical display. "They're actually standing down." Arya wasn't ready to celebrate yet. "Secure the prisoner," she ordered, indicating Vrax. "And continue downloading that database. We need to verify which Dominion commanders can be trusted and which are likely to regroup for a counterattack." Over the next several hours, the situation throughout the Sol system stabilized into an uneasy ceasefire. The broadcast from the Oblivion's Reach had been received by dozens of worlds, sparking immediate uprisings on some and more cautious resistance on others. Dominion forces already stretched thin were suddenly facing a multi-front war against former subjects armed with their own technology. Aboard the captured flagship, now serving as the headquarters for the nascent alliance, Arya convened a council of representatives from all participating factions: human resistance leaders, Takar commanders, Elysian Hive delegates, and even several Dominion officers who had chosen to defect rather than continue a war they could not win. "The Dominion High Command will respond," warned one of these defectors, a Zenith sub-commander named Krell. "They will send reinforcements from the core systems, by which time we'll have consolidated our position and prepared appropriate defenses," Arya replied. "The database we captured includes complete schematics for Void Shield technology phase cannons and FTL communication systems. Humanity may have been knocked down, but we learn quickly." "As do we all," agreed Takar of Elysium. "The question remains, what form will our alliance take once the immediate crisis has passed? The subject worlds have no desire to replace one oppressor with another. Nor does humanity wish to become what we've fought against," Commander Nakamura said. Though still weak from his ordeal, he had insisted on participating in the council. "I propose a coalition, each world self-governing, but united for mutual defense and the advancement of all member species." The discussion continued late into the ship's artificial night cycle, as the diverse representatives hammered out the framework for what would eventually become the Coalition of Free Worlds. Technical teams worked to adapt Dominion technology for use by their former subjects, while tactical groups planned the liberation of nearby systems still under Dominion control. Arya eventually excused herself from the council chamber, needing a moment of solitude to process all that had happened. She found herself in an observation dome at the ship's crown, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so hostile. "Quite a view, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Dr. Karim limped into the dome, her prosthetic leg making a distinctive sound on the metal decking. "From here, you can almost forget what happened to Earth." "Almost." Arya agreed, her gaze drawn to the wounded planet, visible through the dome's transparent sections. "But we shouldn't forget. Not what they did to us, and not what we almost became in response." Karim moved to stand beside her. "The coalition discussions are proceeding well. Better than I expected. It turns out humans aren't the only ones who can set aside old grievances when faced with a common enemy. The Takar and Elysians have been at war for generations, but here they are planning joint operations against Dominion holdouts." "And what about you, Lieutenant? What does Arya Tanaka plan now that her mission is accomplished?" Arya considered the question. For so long, her entire existence had been defined by resistance, by the desperate struggle to keep humanity alive in the shadows. Now, suddenly, there was a future to consider. "Commander Nakamura has proposed that I lead a task force to locate and retrieve isolated human enclaves," she said finally. "There are rumors of settlements beyond the galactic rim that fled during the initial invasion. They may have developed their own technologies, their own strategies for survival. We'll need everyone for what comes next." "The Dominion counterstrike," Karim nodded. "It's inevitable. They can't allow this rebellion to stand." "No," Arya agreed. "But when they come, they won't face a broken, scattered humanity hiding in the dark. They'll face the coalition, every species they've ever subjugated, armed with their own technology and united against their return." She turned from the viewport to face the doctor. "They thought they had defeated us. They were just getting started." 3 months later, Arya stood before the newly formed Coalition Council in what had once been the High Lord's audience chamber, aboard the renamed flagship Unity. The chamber had been transformed, its oppressive Dominion iconography replaced with symbols representing each member species of the Alliance. "The report from the Proxima Centauri Liberation is encouraging," she informed the assembled representatives. Dominion forces retreated after minimal engagement, abandoning 3 fully operational shipyards and a weapons research facility. "We've secured all sites and begun integration of local resistance groups into the coalition command structure." "And the human enclaves?" asked Commander Nakamura. His recovery had been slow, but steady, and while he would never fully heal from the torture he had endured, his mind remained sharp. He now served as humanity's primary representative on the council. "We've located 17 so far," Arya reported. "Most have agreed to join the coalition. A few prefer to maintain their independence, but have offered technical assistance and intelligence. 2 of the Outer Rim settlements had developed significant innovations in stealth technology that our engineers are already adapting for broader use." Takar of Elysium, now serving as the coalition's military coordinator, leaned forward in his seat. "What of the Dominion reinforcements? Our long-range scouts report activity at the warp gate in the Sirius system." "Confirmed," Arya nodded. "A battle group consisting of at least 12 capital ships and associated support vessels. Estimated arrival in Sol system within 2 weeks." An uneasy murmur ran through the council. Despite their successes, the coalition was still consolidating its forces and adapting to the newly shared technologies. A major Dominion counterattack could potentially undo everything they had accomplished. "We should evacuate key personnel to the backup facilities in the Kuiper Belt," suggested one of the human representatives. "Preserve our leadership in case Sol falls again." "No," Arya said firmly. "That's exactly what the Dominion expects, that we'll scatter and hide as we've done before. Instead, I propose we meet them head-on at the warp gate itself. Prevent them from ever reaching Sol." "With what?" demanded an Elysian representative, her insectoid features expressing skepticism. "Our fleet is still being retrofitted, and many of our pilots lack experience with the advanced vessels." "We have something better than experience," Arya replied. "We have innovation." She activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber, showing a modified Dominion cruiser. Dr. Karim and her team have successfully integrated the Orion Pulse technology with conventional Dominion propulsion systems. The result is a hybrid drive that delivers both the speed advantage of nuclear pulse propulsion and the maneuverability of standard engines. Additionally, they've developed a method to focus the pulse energy into a directed weapon system that can overwhelm Dominion void shields. Commander Nakamura studied the display with interest. "How many vessels can be outfitted with this technology before the Dominion fleet arrives?" 20 capital ships and approximately 50 smaller craft, Arya answered. "Enough to form a vanguard that can disrupt their formation as they exit the warp gate. The remainder of our fleet, using conventional weapons, can target the vessels whose shields have been compromised." The Council deliberated the proposal, weighing the risks against the strategic advantage of preventing the Dominion force from establishing a foothold in the system. Eventually, they authorized the operation, with Arya given command of the hybrid drive vanguard. In the days that followed, coalition forces mobilized with a unity and purpose that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Human engineers worked alongside Takar technicians and Elysian navigators, preparing the fleet for what would likely be the defining battle of the rebellion. Throughout the ships, stories were shared, tales of resistance, of survival, of hope maintained through the darkest times. The night before the fleet's departure, Arya found Commander Nakamura in the memorial garden that had been established aboard the Unity. The garden contained soil from Earth and the homeworlds of all coalition species, planted with vegetation that represented each member culture. Nakamura stood before a young oak sapling, its leaves still tender and new. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked as Arya approached. "Realistic," she replied. "The Dominion fleet outguns us even with our modifications. But they're expecting to face the same scattered resistance they've always encountered in this system. They have no idea what we've become." Nakamura nodded, his gaze still fixed on the sapling. I've been thinking about what comes after, assuming we succeed tomorrow. The coalition will expand, bringing in more liberated worlds. Eventually, we'll have to confront the Dominion core systems, perhaps even their homeworld. One battle at a time, Commander Arya cautioned. But yes, I've considered the same. The Dominion's power has always been based on fear and the perceived inevitability of their rule. Once that perception is broken, system after system will rise against them. And humanity's role in this new galaxy. Nakamura turned to face her. We were nearly extinguished, Arya. Now, we find ourselves at the center of an alliance that may reshape the cosmic order. How do we ensure we don't become what we've fought against? It was a profound question, one that Arya had pondered during the quiet moments between crises. By remembering, she said finally. By carrying Earth with us, not just the planet, but what it represented. Diversity, resilience, the capacity to learn from our mistakes. And by ensuring that no species ever faces what we faced alone. Nakamura seemed satisfied with her answer. The Council has approved your proposal for the Coalition Academy, he informed her. A training facility where members of all species can learn from each other, exchange technologies and strategies, forge the personal bonds that will sustain our alliance beyond the current crisis. And you'll oversee it, Arya guessed. A small smile crossed Nakamura's face. They offered, but I declined. I'm too old, too shaped by war to guide the next generation. That responsibility should fall to someone who can see beyond survival to what comes next. His gaze was meaningful. Someone like you, Lieutenant. Before Arya could respond, her communications device chimed. Final fleet preparations are complete, reported Captain Ortiz. All vessels ready for departure at 0600. Acknowledged, Arya replied. I'll be aboard the Defiance within the hour. As she closed the communication, Nakamura placed a hand on her shoulder. Whatever happens tomorrow, Arya, remember this. They thought they had defeated humanity. They were just getting started. Now they have no idea what's coming for them. The following day, as the Coalition fleet prepared to depart for the Sirius Warp Gate, Arya stood on the bridge of the Defiance, now rebuilt and enhanced with the hybrid drive technology. Through the viewports, she could see the assembled vessels, human mining ships retrofitted with Dominion weapons, Takar war barges with their distinctive angular hulls, graceful Elysian carriers, housing swarms of fighter craft, and even several former Dominion cruisers, now commanded by defector crews. It was an unlikely armada, born of desperate circumstances, and forged in the crucible of resistance. Yet, as Arya gave the order to begin the journey to Sirius, she felt something she had not experienced in over 40 years, not just hope, but certainty. The Dominion had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had believed that breaking humanity's military might and devastating their homeworld would end the threat. Instead, it had transformed humanity into something new, something that could unite the very species the Dominion had subjugated, turning their empire against itself. As the fleet engaged their drives and accelerated toward their destiny, Arya recalled something her father had told her long ago before the invasion, when she was just a child, looking up at the stars with wonder. The universe is vast and often hostile, Arya. But remember, we humans have faced extinction before many times throughout our history. And each time we've emerged stronger, more adaptable, more determined to survive. That's our true legacy to the cosmos. Not what we build, but what we overcome. The Dominion was about to learn that lesson. They had thought they were finishing a war. In reality, they had only started one that would ultimately reshape the galaxy and end their reign of terror forever. And leading that change was humanity, not as conquerors, but as liberators united with their fellow sentient beings in a coalition that would long outlive the empire it rose to oppose. They thought they had defeated humanity. They were just getting started.